The blizzard came down hard that night, a wild sweep of white silence crashing down from the Montana highlands. The world had curled into itself, doors locked, fires lit, curtains drawn against the shrieking wind. But on the edge of that world, past the northern ridge of Fairbend, where the pines crowded close and no streetlight dared reach, an old cabin stood in the dark, weather-beaten, knee-deep in snowdrifts, and on its porch, a retired K9 stood like a statue, ears twitching, nose tilted into the cold. Max didn't sleep much anymore, not in storms like these. His eyes, deep amber with flecks of charcoal, scanned the night. He was 10 years old, his back legs stiff with the kind of age earned in war zones and rubble. But his instincts hadn't dulled. He still listened, and on that wind, sharp, howling, relentless, he caught something. Not a sound, not exactly. It was a feeling, a thread of something broken, fragile, lost, a whisper. "I'm sorry, Mom, I'll be good." No one else could have heard it. It was swallowed by snow, tucked deep in the wind's throat. But Max did, and without hesitation he moved. His paws crunched down into the drift with purpose. He didn't bark. He didn't wait. Inside the cabin, Eli Turner sat on the edge of a worn bed, 43 years old, lean and broad-shouldered, with a jaw that looked carved from granite. A thin scar traced his left brow like a stubborn memory refusing to fade. The overhead light cast a warm cone, but it didn't chase away the darkness under his eyes. The silence felt too familiar, too heavy, like a firefight waiting in the shadows. He flexed his right shoulder, old surgery, metal pins, cold weather ache. Breathing wasn't easy these days, not when stillness reminded him of sandstorms and sirens. He reached down, hands settling on the thick fur curled by his feet. Max, the only soul who understood that quiet. Then Max was up. Eli didn't even register it until he heard the porch door creak open and slam shut. "Max!" he shouted, scrambling for his boots. The name vanished into the howl. Snow slammed into him like a wall as he pushed through the door. The flashlight in his hand barely dented the darkness. He caught the flash of paw prints leading off into the trees. "Damn it," he muttered, pulling gloves on with shaking hands. The cold knifed through his coat, through the scar tissue in his shoulder, into the marrow of his bones. But he ran. Max didn't run without reason. Not anymore. The prints veered downhill, toward the old park, Miller's Park, long since abandoned to frost and weeds. Eli stumbled through knee-deep snow, branches clawing at his coat, wind dragging tears from his eyes. Each breath was a burn. Each step was a battle. 10 minutes in and he was soaked to the bone. His gloves were useless. Pain pulsed down his arm with every motion, but he didn't slow. He wouldn't. He saw Max's silhouette first. At the base of the playground slide, the dog stood rigid, tail low, ears pinned back. Eli's boots crunched to a halt beside him, and then he saw her. A small form curled beneath the sagging plastic of the slide, half buried in snow. A girl, no more than 9 or 10, her coat torn, soaked through, one mitten missing, her lips tinged blue, hair stuck to her cheek like frozen silk, and she wasn't moving. Eli dropped to his knees. "Hey," he rasped, voice hoarse. "Hey, kid, can you hear me?" Max whimpered beside him, backing away just a step. The girl's lips moved. "I'm sorry, Mom," she whispered. "I'll be good." And then her eyes closed. Eli didn't hesitate. He scooped her into his arms, so light it nearly broke him, and wrapped her in his own coat. Her skin was ice, her breathing shallow. She felt like a fading ember. "Go home, boy," Eli barked at Max. "Get the door ready." Max ran. The return trip blurred, trees and snow and pain. Eli's shoulders screamed, his lungs burned. But he held her tighter. The flashlight jostled in his grip, barely guiding him through the whipping snow. He didn't stop. He couldn't. The cabin felt 100 miles away. By the time he reached the porch, Max was there, pawing at the door, barking once, sharp and urgent. Eli crashed through, nearly collapsing as he carried the girl inside. He laid her on the couch near the fire, hands trembling as he stripped off soaked layers. Blankets, hot water bottles. He rubbed her hands, her feet, anything to bring her back. Max sat nearby, unmoving, watching. Minutes dragged by. Then her chest lifted, barely, but it did. Again, a little stronger each time. Eli exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. "You found her," he whispered, eyes locked on Max. "You damn old hero." The wind still battered the windows. The storm hadn't relented, but inside the cabin was warm. A child lay safe. A soldier breathed easier. And Max, the dog, who remembered what duty meant even off the battlefield, watched over them both. The fire crackled low, casting golden light across the knotty pine walls. Eli sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes on the girl, her thin frame now wrapped in flannel and wool. Max rested beside her, not sleeping, not blinking, just there, present, guarding. And in that quiet moment, as the storm howled and the fire glowed, something shifted, not loudly, not all at once, but gently, a whisper in the snow, a life saved by an old dog who still knew how to listen. The storm outside still screamed like a wounded thing, but within the cabin, time had slowed to a hush. The couch had become a makeshift bed, layered in soft blankets and an old military sleeping bag. 2 hot water bottles rested beside the small body of the girl, tucked beneath layers of fabric that now steamed faintly with heat. She hadn't stirred since Eli laid her down. He barely moved either, sitting nearby in the dim light, watching the small rise and fall of her chest. Every breath felt like a minor miracle. Her skin had shed the dangerous blue tint, replaced by a pale, almost translucent colour. Her eyelashes were stuck together in frozen clumps, and strands of light brown hair lay matted across her forehead, slowly drying from the melted snow. Her hands remained cold, despite everything he'd done to warm her. But her pulse, weak though it was, held steady. Eli crouched beside her again, gently wiping her forehead with a warm cloth, careful not to wake her. Each motion was slow, reverent. She had spoken before collapsing, just a whisper, just a few words. "I'm sorry, Mom, I'll be good." It haunted him. Max lay nearby like a sentinel carved from stone, his golden brown catching the firelight. He hadn't barked since returning to the cabin. He hadn't paced or whimpered. He simply watched. Every flick of his ear, every twitch of muscle was directed at the girl. Eli didn't need to ask why. Max had already given the answer in the snow. Eli stood finally, wincing at the stabbing pain in his shoulder. The ache bloomed down his back, a cruel reminder of the mortar blast in Mosul 2 years ago. He remembered the sound, the heat, the shrapnel, followed by silence and months of surgery. Rehab had been hell. He still didn't sleep right. He shuffled into the small kitchen, clicked on the kettle, and leaned against the counter. His mind wandered, pulled toward her face again, her features oddly familiar. The shape of her cheekbones, the tilt of her jaw. Something tugged at his memory. Then it hit him. Grace. His older sister had looked just like that at the same age. Thin frame, wide questioning eyes. Grace had been fire and laughter and sharp-witted stubbornness, the kind of girl who always got caught and never apologized. She had left Fairbend over a decade ago, pregnant at 19, defiant after their father, once the sheriff, always a disciplinarian, cut her off. He called her reckless, called the baby a mistake. Grace left with a canvas bag and a swollen belly. She never came back. Eli had seen her once after that years ago when she passed through town on a bus layover. They talked for 20 minutes at the diner. He remembered the tight smile she gave, the way her eyes darted around the room like she didn't belong. They exchanged a few letters after that, short, guarded, trying, then silence. He poured hot water into a chipped mug and dropped in a peppermint tea bag. It was the only non-caffeinated thing in the cabin, and he needed his hands to hold something. As he turned back toward the living room, something on the floor caught his eye, a small notebook, half hidden beneath the couch. It must have fallen from her coat. He bent down and picked it up. The cover was water-stained, the spine warped and soft from exposure. Ink had bled in places, but the bold, uneven letters across the front were still legible. Lily's notes. He sat in the chair across from her and slowly opened it. Inside, the pages were filled with pencil sketches, dozens of them. Some were crude and childlike, others surprisingly careful. They told a story without words. One showed a girl sitting alone at a dinner table, a broken chair beneath her. Another depicted a woman with sharp, playful, angry eyes pointing at a spilled cup of juice. Each image was quiet, stark, filled with emotion too big for captions. Eli exhaled slowly, his fingers resting on a page showing a small figure huddled beneath a bed. He didn't need to guess what it meant. He'd seen enough pain to recognize it. He glanced over at Max. The dog's ears flicked, as if responding to something unseen. "Yeah," Eli murmured. "We've got ourselves a storm survivor." The hours passed slowly. At some point, the sky outside faded from black to a dull gunmetal grey. The storm had quieted, and the snow no longer hurled itself against the windows. Instead, it drifted lazily in the air, falling like ash. Lily stirred. She blinked, her eyelids fluttering open. Her gaze met the ceiling first, then slowly tracked across the room, until it landed on Max. The German shepherd lifted his head slightly, his tail thudding once against the floor in calm recognition. He didn't move closer. He just let her see him. Then her eyes found Eli. "You're not police," she said, her voice dry, more statement than question. "No," Eli replied, gentle. "Name's Eli. This is Max. He found you." She didn't answer. Instead, she reached for the blanket around her and pulled it tighter. "You're safe here," Eli added. "No one's coming. You're not in trouble." She sat up slowly, her small frame stiff and shaking. Her hands moved like they weren't fully hers yet. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the notebook lying on the coffee table. Eli passed it to her without a word. She clutched it to her chest. "Did you read it?" she asked quietly. "I did," he said honestly. "I thought you were dying. I wanted to understand." She didn't speak again, but she didn't run either. Later that day, he heated some broth, homemade chicken from the freezer, mixed with herbs and a dash of pepper. She sat at the small wooden table, Max at her feet. Eli across from her, giving her space. She ate in slow, cautious bites, like she wasn't sure the food was really hers to have. After the meal, she looked down into her empty bowl and asked, "Can I stay tonight?" Eli nodded. "You can stay as long as you need." "They might look for me," she whispered. "Do you want them to find you?" She said nothing, just stared at her hands. That night, Eli made up the cot in the spare room. It hadn't been used in years. He added an extra space heater. He stacked thick blankets on top, checked the locks twice. But when he woke around 3 a.m. from a half-dream soaked in heat and sand, Max was gone from his usual spot at the foot of the bed. Eli crept quietly down the hall. There was Max, sprawled across the floor just outside Lily's door, head between his paws, tail still. He had taken up watch. The next morning the snow still lingered outside, but it was quiet now, almost reverent. Inside the cabin the fire crackled softly. Lily sat near the hearth, Max's head in her lap, her fingers resting on his fur like she was trying to anchor herself to something solid. She hadn't said much, but she didn't need to. She was still here, still breathing. Eli sat on the stairs, coffee in hand, watching her, and for the first time in a very long time he wondered what Grace would have done. The knock came in the early afternoon, crisp and certain, breaking the quiet rhythm of the cabin. Eli rose from his chair, spine stiff from sleep lost and worry accumulated. Through the frosted window, he'd already seen them arrive. 2 figures stepping out of a government-issue SUV, silver and sterile, its engine still humming faintly as steam rose from the hood. Lily sat on the couch, legs tucked under her, both hands cupped around a warm mug of milk. Max lay beside her, head resting in her lap, tail flicking gently now and then like a metronome keeping time. He hadn't left her side since she arrived. Eli opened the door to the storm-dusted porch. The woman who stood there wore a forest green wool coat and gold-rimmed glasses. She extended a gloved hand with measured grace. "Mr. Turner? I'm Danielle Ramos, Child Protective Services. Thank you for calling." Behind her stood Officer Ray Milner, the Sheriff Department's liaison. Older, pale, tired in the eyes. His clipboard was pressed tight against his chest like a shield. Eli stepped aside. "Come in." Inside, Danielle's gaze swept the room, taking in the fire, the worn furniture, the girl. Her eyes lingered on Max for a beat before nodding with approval. "This is Lily Dawson?" she asked, voice even but not cold. Lily nodded once. She didn't speak. She looked down at Max, as if drawing strength through his fur. "We won't stay long," Danielle added softly. "We just want to understand what's happening here." Eli handed over the manila folder he'd prepared. Copies of Grace's letter, Lily's drawings, and a photo of Grace holding an infant Lily outside a clinic. Danielle skimmed the documents with the cool precision of someone who had seen too many broken families. Milner stood behind her, eyes scanning the room, but not really seeing. "Do you know where her guardians are now?" Milner asked, voice like gravel rubbed smooth. "They live in town," Eli answered. "Tracy and Martin Miller." Danielle gave a tight nod. "We'll speak with them." Less than an hour later, the cabin's warmth had shifted. Lily had retreated to the hallway, half concealed in shadow. Max remained planted beside her like a soldier at post, unflinching. The centre of the room now held Tracy Miller. Sharp jawline, pristine cream turtleneck, dark eyes brimming with irritation disguised as concern. Her coat was tailored, her posture controlled. But there was tension under the surface, sharp and brittle. Martin Miller stood at her side, plain, forgettable. A man who had perfected the art of staying quiet, hands buried in his windbreaker pockets, eyes everywhere but on his wife. Tracy spoke first, her voice clipped. Lily ran away. This is all a misunderstanding. Eli didn't move. She's troubled, Tracy continued. Withdrawn. We've tried counselling, extra attention. She just doesn't respond. And then this. Martin gave a slow nod, like punctuation with no conviction. She stole from our daughter, Tracy added, her tone growing colder. A very expensive game console. We found it under her mattress. Then she disappeared that night. We were worried sick. Max growled. Low, unmistakable. A rumble of truth too deep to ignore. Tracy's words halted mid-sentence. Her face paled. Danielle turned toward the hallway. Lily, she called, voice calm. Would you like to say something? There was a pause. Then Lily stepped out, still holding her notebook tightly against her chest. She walked slowly, every movement cautious, until she knelt beside Max and placed a hand on his neck. I didn't take it, she said softly. Sophie put it there. Her mom told her to. Tracy inhaled sharply, ready to cut in, but Danielle raised a single hand. Let her finish. Lily's voice trembled. They made me sleep in the laundry room. I wasn't allowed to eat with them. If I spilled something, I missed meals. I didn't go to Ava's party because I wasn't clean enough. Milner scribbled notes furiously. Danielle's expression remained unreadable. I slept on a mat next to the freezer, Lily added, looking down. Sometimes they forgot I was there. Eli stepped forward, handing Danielle one more sheet of paper, testimony from Mrs. Clara Wheat, the retired schoolteacher who lived 2 doors down from the Millers. Clara had seen Lily out in the snow more than once, coatless. She'd offered her cocoa once. Tracy had told her to mind her business. Danielle folded the letter slowly. Mrs. Miller? She asked. Do you have anything else to say? Tracy's mouth twitched. Her eyes darted, but her voice cracked. We did our best. She's not our daughter. We didn't sign up for this kind of burden. Max barked. Sharp, loud, final. Lily flinched at the sound, but then she smiled, not from fear, but from recognition. Like a line had been drawn in the snow, and this time she wasn't alone behind it. Danielle closed the folder. I'll be filing an emergency petition for protective custody, she announced. Effective immediately, Lily will remain in Mr. Turner's care while we investigate further. If necessary, we'll escalate to family court. Tracy opened her mouth, then shut it. Martin said nothing at all. As the Millers left, Danielle knelt one more time beside Lily. Would you be okay staying here for a while? She asked. Lily nodded. Max is here. Danielle smiled gently. That's a very good reason. Snow still lined the edges of the cabin porch like a fading memory of winter's fury. The sky had lightened to a dull pewter grey, casting soft light across the trees. Inside, the fire continued to crackle, and Max returned to his usual place at Lily's feet. She whispered something to him that no one else could hear, and his tail thumped once, slow and steady. Eli stood in the kitchen doorway, hands deep in his pockets, watching them. For the first time in weeks, something inside him eased. Not all the way. Not yet. But just enough to feel like maybe, just maybe, they were headed towards something that looked like peace. The storm outside had passed, but the quiet storm inside the cabin, made of old scars, half-healed wounds, and the trembling hope of a child, was only just beginning to rise. The courthouse was a small, weathered building tucked between 2 leafless oaks, its wooden steps lined with frozen slush and footprints from heavy boots. Snow still clung to the eaves like stubborn memories of the last storm, and inside the radiator hissed in protest against the cold, as if it too was weary of winter's grip. Eli sat upright in the front row of benches, his back straight, jaw clean-shaven, and navy blazer pressed and buttoned. The same one he had worn to Grace's funeral. His right arm remained stiff from the shrapnel repair, and he moved it only when absolutely necessary. Max lay at his feet, his fur brushed out, his eyes steady and alert, ears perked like he understood exactly where he was. A soldier waiting for his next command. Beside Eli sat Lily, her legs dangling above the floor in corduroy pants. Sarah had mended the night before. Her navy coat was neat, her hair pulled back in a simple braid, the ends curling slightly near her shoulders. A small spiral notebook rested in her lap. Her fingers curled tightly around it as if it anchored her in place. She hadn't said much that morning, but when they entered the courtroom and Max had followed her in, no leash, no hesitation, she had whispered, "He's better than a lawyer anyway." At the bench stood Judge Elaine Hart. In her early 50s, Judge Hart wore a deep burgundy robe instead of black, a quiet rebellion against tradition no one dared question anymore. Her auburn hair was cut to her shoulders, practical and elegant. Her gaze swept the room with precise calm. Her voice, when she opened the session, was clear and unwavering. Court is now in session for the matter of temporary custody regarding minor Lily Dawson. Across the room, Tracy and Martin Miller sat like ghosts pretending to be people. Tracy wore a navy coat and a tight silk scarf knotted at her throat. Her lipstick was dark, severe, as if armor could be painted on. Her chin tilted slightly upward, a practiced expression of restrained offense. Martin, in a grey pullover and khakis, shifted uncomfortably. His eyes kept drifting to the windows. The first part of the hearing moved quickly. Introductions, procedural statements, the court clerk confirming records. Then Eli stood and presented a series of documents to the judge. A notarized letter from Grace, a certified DNA test confirming a 99.9% probability that he was Lily's maternal uncle, photographs of Grace with Lily, and a signed affidavit from Clara Wheat detailing Lily's mistreatment. Judge Hart accepted the folder without expression, flipping through the contents with deliberate care. Then she looked up, her gaze sharp. "Mrs. Miller," she said, "you have stated under oath that Lily Dawson has behavioral problems and was caught stealing from your daughter. Do you still maintain this claim?" Tracy leaned forward, her tone falsely composed. "Yes, Your Honor. A handheld gaming device was found hidden in Lily's belongings. She had been acting out for weeks, sullen, sneaky, disrespectful. We did everything we could. Is your daughter Sophie present?" "She is." A bailiff brought Sophie into the room. She was a small girl with long blonde hair tied in matching ribbons, wearing a velvet dress too formal for a courtroom. She looked between her mother and the judge, confused and hesitant, her fingers twisting the hem of her sleeve. Judge Hart softened her tone. "Sophie, I'd like you to tell me what happened with the game. Just your own words. No one will be angry." Sophie glanced at Tracy, who gave her a smile tight with warning. Sophie swallowed, then looked down. Her eyes met Max's, then flicked to Lily, who was watching her silently, her arms still wrapped around her notebook. "I lied," Sophie whispered. "I put the toy in Lily's blanket. Mommy told me to." The room fell into stillness. "She said Lily was taking too much space," Sophie added, her voice barely audible. "She said to put it there and not to tell." Tracy's mouth opened, but no sound came. Martin turned pale. "Sophie," Martin started, but Judge Hart raised a hand. "Thank you, Sophie. You may return to the hallway." The little girl left quickly, her shoes tapping faintly on the tile floor. Tracy stood, her voice raised and shaking. "She's just a child. She doesn't know what she's saying. She's been under a lot of stress." Max stood. He didn't bark, didn't growl, just rose to full height and stepped between Lily and Tracy with quiet, deliberate purpose. His stance wasn't threatening, just immovable, like a stone wall placed in defense of something sacred. Tracy froze. Judge Hart tilted her head. Apparently, not everyone finds her presence so threatening. The room let out a collective exhale. Lily's voice broke the silence, soft, steady. "I don't want anything," she said, "not toys or cake or dresses. I just want to live with Max." Her voice trembled just slightly. "He doesn't yell, he doesn't lie, and he stays." Eli closed his eyes for a second. Judge Hart looked down, took a breath, then addressed the room. "This court acknowledges credible evidence of neglect and emotional abuse, with a confirmed familial tie between Mr. Turner and the minor. In light of Sophie Miller's testimony, I will issue a provisional order placing Lily Dawson in the care of Eli Turner, pending further investigation." Tracy looked like the air had been sucked from her lungs. Martin didn't move. The judge continued, her tone resolute. "Let the record show that sometimes the most loyal witness doesn't speak at all." The gavel struck once. Final. Outside, snow had begun again, but it didn't feel heavy anymore. Not threatening. It fell softly like a promise, dusting the streets of Fairbend in quiet celebration. The air was still cold, but it didn't bite. It breathed. Back at the cabin, Lily's drawings now filled the refrigerator door, taped up with magnets shaped like stars and pine trees. Max's bed had been pulled closer to the fire, its cushion doubled and covered in an old quilt. The scent of tomato soup and grilled cheese lingered in the air. Sarah dropped by more often now, sometimes with muffins, sometimes with books, always with a knowing smile. Eli had begun to laugh again. Not often, not loudly, but real. And Lily? She walked with steadier steps now. She paused to study windows, the pages of old books, the slow dance of snow outside. She no longer flinched when someone raised their voice in another room. She no longer whispered apologies for taking up space. One night, curled beside Max, she looked up at Eli as he passed and asked, "What if we made a place where kids like me could go when no one listens?" Eli blinked. "Like a home?" he asked. "Like a place where Max would go if he were a person?" He didn't answer. Not yet. But the idea had landed. It curled into the corners of the cabin like a spark waiting for kindling, because something had begun. Not loud, not fast, but steady. And in that soft unfolding a new rhythm began, one stitched not from fear but from belonging. From names reclaimed, from a girl and a dog and a soldier who had finally found something worth staying for. The old ranger outpost sat half-sunken in weeds at the bottom of the hill, abandoned for years. Its windows were cracked, roof sagging, floorboards warped from snowmelt and time. Once a depot for Forest Service patrols, it had become nothing more than a ghost in the trees. But now, it was being brought back to life. Eli stood in the doorway, sleeves rolled to his elbows, hammer in one hand and a strip of insulation tucked under his arm. Sarah was painting the front porch steps a soft yellow, her brush moving in long, confident strokes. Lily crouched nearby, carefully tracing letters above the door with a small paintbrush dipped in navy blue. Each one deliberate, her tongue poking slightly from the corner of her mouth as she worked. Max's shelter. Beneath it, in smaller lettering written by Lily's own hand, "Here every child is found before it's too late." The name had been her idea. The purpose too. It started as a question one morning at the kitchen table, spoken around a mouthful of oatmeal. What if we made a place where kids like me could go when no one listens? Eli hadn't answered right away. He just looked at Max, lying under the table, tail wagging faintly at Lily's voice. But later that week, he called the county office, asked about the abandoned outpost, and made an offer to lease it for $1 a year. The mayor raised an eyebrow but signed the paperwork with a shrug. "If you can fix it up, it's yours," he said. Local businesses donated supplies. A retired teacher offered tutoring. Volunteers helped scrub the mold from the walls, replace the cracked windows, and haul in bunk beds and soft rugs. Sarah brought curtains and baked muffins for the helpers. The transformation was slow, but steady, just like Max. Even as the dog's steps grew slower and his naps longer, he never missed a walk, never ignored the sound of a child crying. He greeted every new visitor at the shelter door like an old friend returning. If a kid sat alone, Max was there. If one of them was shaking with memories too hard to speak, he'd rest his head on their lap until the shaking stopped. One afternoon, Lily sat on the porch of the cabin, watching the snow melt into rivulets across the dirt path. Max was beside her, his fur greying around the muzzle, his breath slower, deeper. She wore a yellow sundress over jeans, her feet bare against the worn wood, and her arms, longer now, rested in her lap. She had grown in the quiet way children do when they feel safe. "You found me first, Max," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. His tail thumped once. Inside, Eli stood by the window, coffee mug in hand, watching them. His other hand moved unconsciously to rub at the scar beneath his collarbone, a habit when the weather shifted or when memories stirred. He had noticed Max's hesitation going up the stairs, the way he waited at the bottom now until Eli helped him. He hadn't told Lily. She had only just started to smile without guarding it. There was no reason to place another weight on her. Not yet. That evening, while Lily helped Sarah inventory books at the shelter, Eli went into the storage room off the kitchen. Dust coated every surface. Old hunting gear hung unused on nails, a broken snowblower sat under a tarp, and there were shelves full of wood scraps. He measured, cut, and sanded. By the time the sun dipped behind the ridge, he had built a ramp. It wasn't fancy, just a wide, sturdy board with traction strips and a side rail running from the porch down to the snowy yard. When Lily and Max returned, their cheeks pink from the cold and their boots dripping with slush, she stopped short at the sight of it. "For Max," Eli said simply. Her eyes widened. "So he doesn't have to jump?" "He's not as springy as he used to be." She knelt beside Max and wrapped her arms around his neck. "You're still my best boy." Dinner that night was grilled cheese and tomato soup. Lily declared it the fanciest thing ever made. They ate by the fire. Max curled at Lily's feet, his nose resting on the edge of the blanket. His eyes drooped as the heat soaked into his joints. Later, Lily sat on the floor with a book of poetry, her finger tracing each line as if decoding an ancient language. "Eli?" she asked suddenly. "Yeah? What did Grace like to read?" He glanced up, surprised. Then he smiled, soft and nostalgic. Ghost stories. Scary ones, the kind with creaky stairs and windows that opened by themselves. She didn't get scared? Nope. She said she liked the thrill, said it made her feel alive. Lily nodded, thoughtful. "Can I read one?" He stood, walked to the bookshelf, and pulled down a dog-eared volume with a cracked leather spine. He handed it to her like it was sacred. She sat cross-legged beside Max, carefully opening the book and mouthing the words to herself. Eli leaned back in his chair, watching her. For the first time in a long time, he saw something he hadn't dared hope for. Peace. Not silence, not distance, but peace, the kind that wrapped around the room like a soft, invisible blanket. That night, after she fell asleep with Max's head under her arm and the book still open beside her, Eli passed her doorway and paused. The lamp cast a dim glow. Her notebook lay near her pillow. Max blinked once at Eli's presence, then closed his eyes again. "You did good, old man," Eli whispered. "Real good." The next morning, Lily was already awake when he came into the kitchen. She was at the table, a drawing in front of her. It showed Max standing tall beside a little girl, mountains in the background. Above them were words written in blocky, careful handwriting, "My first friend." Eli didn't say anything. He just poured her some orange juice and sat beside her. A few days later, Sarah stopped by with muffins. Blueberry, still warm. She brushed snow off her coat as she stepped inside and handed over the reusable cloth bag with a red ribbon tied to its handle. "Thought you could use something sweet," she said. Eli smiled. "Lily's in the yard with Max." Sarah peered out the window, watching the pair through the glass. "He's slowing down." "I know. You going to tell her?" "Not yet." Sarah placed the muffins on the counter and turned to face him. Her voice softened. "When you do, be gentle. She's patching herself up, but the stitches aren't tight yet." He nodded. Before she left, she kissed Lily's forehead and knelt to rub behind Max's ears. "You're a good dog," she whispered. "Don't worry, she's got people now." The snow softened that week, draping the pines in velvet white. It no longer howled or stung. It drifted, gentle, like breath. Inside the cabin, the rhythm of their lives found its footing. Quiet humming in the morning, Max's claws on the floor, the smell of tea and firewood, and always the presence of something unspoken, a bond formed not from words, but from warmth, from being found and never left behind again. It was while cleaning out an old drawer in what had once been Grace's room, now Lily's, that Eli found it. A small black object, no larger than his palm, tucked behind a stack of faded letters and half-used notebooks. Dust clung to its edges, and when he picked it up, he immediately recognized the weight and shape. An old voice recorder. He hadn't seen it in years. Grace used to carry it everywhere back when she was freelancing for a local radio station. She'd tuck it in her coat pocket, click it on during interviews at diners, community fairs, or even just to capture the sound of wind through trees. Sometimes, when she was thinking through something, she'd talk into it instead of writing it down. Eli brushed off the dust and clicked play. There was static at first, then the soft rustle of blankets, and then Grace's voice. Tired, barely above a whisper. "I don't know who will ever hear this. Maybe no one. Maybe I'll toss this in a drawer and forget it, but I just needed to talk to Lily. My Lily." Eli froze. His breath caught mid-chest. The world around him dimmed as the recording played on. "You're sleeping next to me. We have no heat. You keep kicking your blanket off, and I keep pulling it back. You smile in your sleep. I think you'll be okay someday. Someone will see you for what you are. Not a burden, not a secret. Just a little girl who hums when she draws and holds crackers out for birds, even when you know they won't come." Her voice trembled then, ragged with guilt and love stretched thin. "I wish I'd been brave enough to bring you back to Montana, but they made it clear they didn't want you. Not really. Not after what happened. And maybe I was a coward. Maybe your uncle will be stronger than me. If this ever gets to him, Eli, I'm sorry. But please, if she finds you, don't make her apologize for existing. Just let her be." The recorder clicked off. Eli sat there for a long time, the silence afterward pressing in around him like snow on a rooftop. There was no thunder, no dramatic music, just the ache of something old breaking open inside his chest. He stood and walked into the living room where Lily was curled on the rug beside Max, reading aloud from a battered children's book. Her voice was soft, raspy from dry winter air. Max blinked slowly, his ears twitching with every rise and fall of her tone. Eli knelt beside them and held out the recorder. "I found something of your mom's," he said gently. I think she left it for us." Lily took it in both hands, her fingers trembling. When she pressed play, she barely breathed. As Grace's voice filled the room again, Lily listened without flinching. She didn't cry. When the message ended, she looked at Max, then at Eli. "She thought I smiled in my sleep," she whispered. Eli nodded, eyes damp. She was right. That night, snow fell again, not thick and heavy, but fine, like silver threads drawn from the sky. Eli stayed up late, writing the first draft of the petition for full custody. No more waiting, no more limbo. Grace had wanted safety for her daughter. He would give it to her, not from obligation, but from promise. It was early morning when the thump came. Not a bark, not a growl, just a dull, sudden thud from the hallway. Eli bolted upright in bed, adrenaline cutting through sleep. He found Lily on her knees by the front hall, still in her pajamas, arms wrapped tightly around Max's neck. "Max won't wake up," she whispered. "He was trying to follow me to the bathroom, and he just fell." Her voice cracked with panic. Eli dropped beside them, his hands moving fast but gentle. Max's body was limp, his breathing shallow, his fur colder than usual. His hind leg twitched faintly, but otherwise he lay still. "We need to get him warm," Eli said, steady but urgent. "Get blankets." Lily ran, dragging two across the floor, her small hands fumbling with the edges. Together they wrapped Max tightly, tucking him in like a fragile ember in danger of going out. Eli turned the thermostat up, hauled the space heater into the hallway, and sat beside them on the floor. Time lost all meaning. Lily didn't move. She kept her cheek pressed to Max's fur, murmuring over and over, "Don't go, Max, don't go." Outside, the sky slowly shifted from indigo to grey. Dawn crept in, pale and tentative. Inside, the fire had burned low, but the air had grown warm from something else, something heavier than heat, more powerful than panic. Then slowly Max moved, his paw twitched. A soft breath escaped his nostrils. His tail thumped once against the floor. "He's okay," Lily gasped. "He's still here." Eli let out a long breath, his hand resting over his heart. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, he is." Lily leaned close and whispered, "You're not allowed to leave yet." Max blinked once, groggy but alive. Something passed between them then, something Eli could only witness, never explain. A bond beyond words. That afternoon, a local vet made a house call. Max had suffered a collapse likely caused by overexertion and cold stress, compounded by his worsening arthritis. He needed rest, warmth, and gentleness. Lily stayed beside him all day, her hand on his side like an anchor. "He saved me in the snow," she whispered once. "Now I'll save him." Eli didn't say anything. Instead, he stepped outside to call Danielle. "It's time," he said. "I want to make it permanent. She's home now. We're home." The courtroom smelled like pine cleaner and melting snow. Outside, the streets of Fairbend were still lined with ice, but inside the chamber, something felt different. Brighter, steadier. Lily sat beside Eli, her boots barely grazing the floor, legs swinging slightly. She wore a thick blue sweater Sarah had knitted, the sleeves pushed to her elbows. Her hair hung in soft brown waves, a braid tucked behind one ear. In her lap she clutched a small stuffed bear, one eye missing, the last thing she'd kept from the house she'd run from. Max, brushed and proud, lay curled at her feet. The judge that day was Marion Collingsworth, a woman in her late 60s with sharp eyes and a wedding ring no one ever asked about. Her voice was soft but firm. "Let's begin." Eli stood, presenting final custody papers, letters from counsellors, references from Sarah and the school principal, and a copy of Grace's voice recording. Then he handed over a newly issued birth certificate. Lily Grace Turner. The judge adjusted her glasses and looked down at Lily. "Do you understand what's happening today?" Lily nodded. "I think so." "Would you like to say anything?" She looked at Eli, then at Max. I don't want to go anywhere else. I don't want to be moved again. I'm not trouble. I just needed someone to find me. Max did. Then Eli did. And now I don't feel scared anymore." The judge smiled softly, then lifted the gavel. "Custody is awarded to Eli Turner. The name Lily Grace Turner is hereby recognized by the state of Montana." The gavel fell. It was done. Outside, snow began again, but it didn't feel like a weight. It felt like celebration, like the sky had finally exhaled. The cabin remained their home, but now it felt different, warmer, lived in. Lily's drawings lined the fridge. Max's bed sat closer to the fire, double-padded. Sarah came by more often, sometimes with soup, sometimes with stories. And Eli, he laughed now, not often, but when he did, it reached his eyes. And then came the day Lily asked, "What if we made Max's shelter bigger?" Eli looked at her. Bigger, more rooms, more kids. And so the dream grew. One late spring evening, with the last snow melting into earth and the air thick with the smell of pine, Lily sat beside Max on the porch. Her arms were longer now, her legs stretched far beneath her yellow dress. She rested her hand on Max's back. "You found me first," she whispered. "I'll never forget." His tail moved once. Because sometimes the greatest miracles don't arrive with fanfare. Sometimes they come on four tired paws, carrying a whisper through a storm, and refuse to leave.